Africa is far more than arid plains and small-scale farms. It is a continent that holds one of the largest reserves of agricultural land on Earth and is home to many of the world's most strategic crops. By 2030, its food and agriculture market is projected to reach $1 trillion. From West African cocoa shaking global chocolate prices to sugarcane fields producing more than 11 million tons of sugar each year, average olive oil production reaching around 220,000 tons annually, and Kenyan flowers flying directly to Europe, African agriculture is entering a massive transformation. And behind this change is not only fertile land, but also more modern farming systems, expanding infrastructure, processing plants, export networks, and supply chains that are gradually bringing African agricultural products to the world. Africa is one of the world's most paradoxical agricultural regions. Covering more than 30 million square kilometers, the continent encompasses an extraordinary range of climates, from cool highlands and tropical rainforests to vast savannas and fertile river basins such as the Nile, Niger, and Congo. It is also believed to hold the largest share of the world's remaining uncultivated arable land. Yet despite this immense potential, African agriculture faces formidable challenges: prolonged droughts, desertification, water scarcity, weak infrastructure, massive post-harvest losses, and millions of smallholder farmers who still rely on basic tools and traditional farming methods. It is within this contradiction that a remarkable transformation is taking place. From West African cocoa that influences the global chocolate industry, Ethiopian coffee, Kenyan flowers, and South African fruit exports to farms powered by solar energy, Africa is steadily turning its land, climate, and young population into a new engine of economic growth. Every year, Africa's agricultural sector generates approximately $450 billion in economic value, a figure larger than the gross domestic product of many countries combined. Yet the most striking reality is that much of this output still comes from small farms, rain-fed fields, and millions of farming households working with limited access to water, machinery, and post-harvest storage infrastructure. Among Africa's cut flower producers, Kenya stands out for its roses, the country's flagship flower that has made it one of the world's leading suppliers to markets across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. In 2025, Kenya's floriculture industry was estimated to generate around 110 billion Kenyan shillings, approximately $845 million in export revenue. Roses account for the largest share of that value, turning the vast greenhouse complexes around Lake Naivasha into a global flower factory connected by an advanced cold chain supply network. Around Lake Naivasha and the surrounding cool highlands, millions of rose stems are cultivated inside expansive greenhouses where temperature, humidity, light, and irrigation are carefully controlled. These conditions ensure consistent colors, straight stems, firm buds, and the precise blooming stage required for international export markets. Rather than relying entirely on open-field cultivation, many Kenyan rose farms employ drip irrigation, fertigation, rainwater harvesting, soil moisture sensors, and integrated pest management to reduce chemical use. Some farms are also experimenting with hydroponic systems and water recycling to conserve resources, particularly as Lake Naivasha faces increasing environmental pressures. Inside the greenhouses, rose plants are meticulously maintained and pruned on a regular basis so they can direct more energy into producing strong stems and premium quality buds that meet strict international standards for length, strength, and color. Once the roses reach export quality, workers typically harvest them early in the morning or during the coolest part of the day to maximize freshness. The flowers are then carefully graded according to stem length, bud size, color, stem straightness, and stage of bloom. Premium stems are bundled, rapidly pre-cooled, packed into specialized cartons, transported by refrigerated trucks to Nairobi's international airport, and flown directly to customers across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. In Africa, cocoa is more than just a tropical crop. It is the beating heart of the global chocolate industry. From Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, to Cameroon, millions of smallholder farmers cultivate cocoa in plantations hidden deep within the continent's humid tropical forests. In 2024, Côte d'Ivoire exported approximately $7.18 billion worth of cocoa and cocoa products. Looking ahead to the 2024-2025 marketing season, the country is expected to produce around 2.1 to 2.2 million metric tons of cocoa. These figures underscore the crop's enormous importance to Africa's economy, particularly as Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana together continue to supply more than 60% of the world's cocoa. Cocoa trees are typically grown beneath the shade of taller trees, which help retain soil moisture, reduce heat stress, and protect the land from degradation. Many farmers also practice agroforestry by intercropping cocoa with bananas, timber trees, or fruit trees. This approach not only diversifies income, but also makes plantations more resilient to increasingly unpredictable weather. Modern cultivation techniques, including regular pruning, mulching with dried leaves, organic fertilization, high-yield hybrid varieties, and improved disease management, are becoming increasingly widespread. When the cocoa pods ripen, workers carefully harvest them using knives or long-handled cutting tools to avoid damaging the trees. The pods are split open, revealing white beans coated in a sweet pulp. The beans are then fermented in wooden boxes or covered with banana leaves, a crucial stage that develops the distinctive flavors and aromas of chocolate. After fermentation, the beans are sun-dried, grated, bagged, and transported to processing facilities. From these beans come cocoa powder, cocoa butter, chocolate, confectionery, cocoa-based beverages, and even ingredients for the cosmetics industry. For Africa, cocoa is therefore far more than an export crop. It represents an ongoing effort to capture a greater share of value within the global chocolate supply chain. In North Africa, the olive is far more than a familiar Mediterranean crop. It is a symbol of arid climates, rocky landscapes, and the remarkable ability to transform semi-desert land into a major source of export revenue. From Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, to Egypt, vast olive groves stretch across rolling hills, coastal plains, and even barren terrain where few other crops can survive for decades. Among these countries, Tunisia stands out as Africa's leading olive oil producer. The country has generated approximately $1.3 billion in olive oil export revenue and consistently ranks among the world's largest olive oil exporters. One of the olive tree's greatest advantages is its exceptional drought tolerance. Unlike many fruit crops, olives require relatively little water. Farmers typically space the trees widely to encourage deep root growth, while pruning the canopy, mulching around the base to conserve soil moisture, installing drip irrigation on more modern farms, and planting drought-resistant varieties to cope with rising temperatures. On large commercial plantations, trunk shakers, collection nets, and continuous olive oil extraction systems are gradually replacing fully manual harvesting. Yet across many rural communities in North Africa, it is still common to see families spreading nets beneath the trees before shaking the branches with handheld tools or carefully picking the olives by hand. After harvest, the olives are transported quickly to processing mills, where they are washed, crushed, malaxed, and centrifuged to extract the oil. The harvest is transformed into extra virgin olive oil, bottled olive oil, brined olives, tapenade, salad ingredients, bread served with olive oil, couscous, tagine, and countless other traditional products. For North Africa, olives are much more than food. They form the foundation of an industry that connects farmers, olive mills, seaports, and consumers across the global marketplace. Sugarcane is one of Africa's most important industrial crops, linking tropical fields to sugar mills, biomass power plants, and the everyday food supply. From South Africa, Egypt, Eswatini, Mozambique, Zambia, to Mauritius, sugarcane is cultivated in hot, sunny regions where the crop can accumulate high concentrations of sugar in its stalks. Across the continent, Africa produces more than 11 million metric tons of sugar each year. In South Africa alone, the sugar industry generates approximately 24 billion rand in direct annual income, highlighting the crop's vital role in rural economies, employment, and food security. Unlike many short-season crops, sugarcane requires a long growing cycle of 12 to 18 months. Farmers typically plant stem cuttings in prepared furrows before managing the crop through irrigation, fertilization, weed control, and continuous monitoring for pests and diseases. On more advanced farms, drip irrigation systems, soil moisture sensors, drought-tolerant varieties, soil mapping, and mechanical harvesters are increasingly being adopted to improve yields, reduce losses, and conserve water. Once the cane reaches its peak sugar content, the fields are harvested either by hand or with specialized machinery. The stalks are cut close to the ground, stripped of their leaves, loaded onto trucks, and transported quickly to nearby mills before their sugar content begins to decline. At the processing plant, the cane is crushed to extract its juice, which is then clarified, concentrated, crystallized, and centrifuged to produce raw or refined sugar. The remaining molasses can be processed into syrup, livestock feed, or bioethanol, while bagasse, the fibrous residue left after crushing, is burned to generate steam and electricity. As a result, Africa's sugar industry produces far more than just the sugar used in confectionery, soft drinks, and processed foods. It has evolved into an integrated industrial system in which nearly every part of the sugarcane plant is put to productive use. In a country best known for its deserts, pyramids, and the Nile River, Egypt has quietly built one of the world's largest tilapia farming industries. What makes this even more remarkable is that tilapia is nothing new here. The fish appeared in ancient Egyptian carvings and played a role in daily life along the Nile thousands of years ago. Today, however, it is no longer just a traditional food. It has become the cornerstone of Egypt's modern aquaculture industry. Egypt is now Africa's leading aquaculture producer, raising approximately 1.6 million metric tons of fish each year, with an estimated value of around $3.5 billion. Aquaculture accounts for roughly 80% of the country's total fish production, and Nile tilapia is by far its most important species. Across the fertile Nile Delta, vast earthen ponds operated by private fish farms have transformed hot, dry landscapes into large-scale protein production systems, providing affordable food for millions of people. Nile tilapia is highly valued because it grows rapidly, tolerates high stocking densities, readily consumes commercial feed, and thrives in warm water. Once the fish reach market size, workers harvest them using large seine nets, sort them by weight, and transport them to fish markets, processing facilities, or refrigerated distribution networks. Egyptian tilapia is commonly sold fresh or as fillets and is prepared grilled, fried, or cooked in tomato-based sauces, often served with rice, bread, or traditional Mediterranean family dishes. From a humble freshwater fish to the backbone of a modern food industry, Nile tilapia has become a powerful symbol of how Egypt has combined water resources, farming technology, and large-scale production to create a protein powerhouse in the heart of North Africa's arid landscape. In the Horn of Africa, where drought, deserts, and arid grasslands can persist for months, camels are far more than livestock. They are the ultimate machines of survival for Somalia and Ethiopia. While cattle, goats, and sheep often struggle during prolonged water shortages, camels can travel long distances across scorching landscapes, feed on thorny shrubs, endure extended periods without water, and continue producing milk for human consumption. For many pastoral communities, a camel is not merely an animal. It is a living bank account, a means of transportation, a source of food, and a symbol of wealth. Somalia is widely regarded as one of the countries most deeply connected to camel husbandry. Livestock plays a central role in the nation's economy, with live animals, including goats, sheep, cattle, and camels, exported in large numbers to Middle Eastern markets, particularly during major religious festivals. Ethiopia also maintains one of Africa's largest camel populations, especially in the arid regions of Somali, Afar, and Oromia, where camel milk serves as a vital source of nutrition for pastoral communities. What is particularly remarkable is that the camel industry in this region is beginning to modernize. Instead of relying solely on hand milking and selling fresh milk in local markets, some farms near urban centers have introduced veterinary care, cultivated fodder crops, hygienic milking practices, rapid cooling systems, and processing facilities that produce bottled camel milk, yogurt, and even premium nutritional products. In Somalia, commercial camel dairy operations around Mogadishu are demonstrating a new path forward, transforming an animal long associated with nomadic life into the foundation of a modern food industry. From camel caravans crossing the desert to refrigerated dairy supply chains, the Horn of Africa is telling a different story about livestock farming. Not one of fighting against arid conditions, but of learning how to thrive and prosper alongside them. When people think of Turkey, they often picture the hot air balloons drifting across the skies of Cappadocia, the rocky valleys that resemble the surface of another planet, or the iconic blue Nazar charm that appears everywhere, from homes and shops to souvenir stalls. Yet behind these distinctive images lies a less noticed reality. Turkey did not build its agricultural sector on ideal farmland. Arable land accounts for only a little over 1/4 of the country's territory. Behind its famous farming regions is a harsh reality. Large areas are too steep, too dry, covered with thin, rocky soils, highly vulnerable to erosion, and short of water for easy cultivation. Deep in the interior, long summers, irregular rainfall, and poor water retention make irrigation not just important, but essential for survival. In Konya, one of the key agricultural regions of central Anatolia, excessive groundwater extraction and prolonged drought have even created massive sinkholes in the middle of farmland, serving as a stark warning that the land here is not only dry, but is also being drained from below. Yet despite these limitations, Turkey has built an agricultural sector worth around $68 billion. This achievement is not the result of perfect natural conditions, but of choosing the right crops for the right regions, expanding irrigation infrastructure, and managing every drop of water more efficiently. One of the ways Turkey deals with drought is by turning water into a technology-controlled system. In the southeast of the country, the Giat Peat project is seen as the biggest symbol of this ambition. The project includes 22 dams, 19 hydroelectric power plants, and irrigation systems for around 1.8 million hectares of land in the Euphrates and Tigris river basins. The idea behind it is clear: bring water to hot, dry regions to grow cotton, wheat, corn, fruit trees, and vegetables. But the modern side of irrigation is not only found in giant dams. Turkey is gradually shifting from traditional flood irrigation to closed pipe systems, sprinkler irrigation, and drip irrigation. With closed pipe systems, water no longer has to flow through long open canals, which helps reduce losses from seepage and evaporation. With drip irrigation, water passes through plastic pipes, filters, pressure-regulating valves, and drip emitters before falling directly into the root zone of the plants. As a result, crops receive water exactly where they need it, instead of the entire field being soaked. In vineyards, orchards, and greenhouses, these systems are also combined with soil moisture sensors, weather stations, automatic pumps, and fertigation units. This means irrigation in Turkey is no longer just about bringing water into the field. It has become a precision management network, measuring the soil, tracking the weather, controlling pumps, filtering water, distributing pressure, and delivering every drop to the right plant. If there is one product that gives Turkey a special position in global agriculture, it is the hazelnut. The country usually supplies around 60 to 70% of global hazelnut production, with more than 700,000 hectares under cultivation. In 2024, Turkey's hazelnut exports reached more than 320,000 tons of kernels, generating around $2.6 billion. This means that many chocolate bars, confectionery products, ice creams, and praline fillings around the world may begin on the hillsides along the Black Sea. The heart of the hazelnut industry lies in provinces such as Ordu, Giresunspor, and Düzce. Many hazelnut orchards here are not located on flat fields, but stretch along steep mountain slopes where the climate is humid, cool, and rainy. When harvest season arrives, in steep orchards, people still have to pick the nuts or collect fallen hazelnuts by hand because large machines are difficult to operate. But in gentler areas, some stages have been mechanized. Mowers clear the ground before harvest. Leaf blowers gather the nuts into rows. Vacuum machines or harvesters collect the nuts from the ground. Then, threshing machines help separate the nuts from leaves and the green outer husks. After harvest, the hazelnuts are sun-dried or placed in temperature-controlled dryers to reduce moisture, limit mold growth, and preserve kernel quality. Once dry enough, they are sent to factories for cleaning, sizing, cracking, and kernel extraction. Sieving machines, air blowers, and optical sorters continue removing empty nuts, broken kernels, dark kernels, and impurities. Finally, the kernels can be sold raw, roasted, chopped, ground into flour, pressed for oil, or processed into paste for the chocolate industry. Turkey is one of the world's largest honey-producing countries. In 2023, it produced around 114,000 tons of honey, thanks to its highly diverse ecosystems: pine forests in the Aegean region, wildflowers across the Anatolian Plateau, chestnut forests along the Black Sea, and mountain valleys in the east. What makes Turkish beekeeping especially interesting is that many beekeepers do not keep their hives fixed in one place. Instead, they practice migratory beekeeping. When the flowering season begins in one region, the hives are loaded onto trucks and transported there. When the nectar source declines, they move to another area. As a result, bees can collect nectar from many different sources, producing wildflower honey, chestnut honey, pine honey, meadow honey, or honey from fruit orchards. The production process begins with inspecting the colonies, adding frames, and monitoring the health of the queen bee. When the honeycombs are full and sealed with wax by the bees, the beekeeper removes the frames from the hive. In modern facilities, they use electric or heated uncapping knives to remove the wax caps, then place the frames into a centrifugal extractor. This machine spins rapidly, forcing the honey out of the comb while keeping the wax frame intact, allowing the bees to reuse it. After that, the honey is filtered through mesh screens to remove wax particles, then transferred into stainless steel settling tanks. Finally, it is filled by machine into glass jars or large containers, labeled according to floral source, and sent to the market. What makes Turkish honey unique is that each region creates a different flavor. But the industry is also highly sensitive to climate. If drought lasts too long, plants produce fewer flowers and bees collect less nectar. So beekeeping in Turkey is not just about producing honey. It is also a constant journey following the flowering seasons across the country's map. One of the most distinctive images of Turkish agriculture is the Angora goat. This breed is closely associated with the Ankara region and is famous for its long, curly, and silky fleece. From this fleece, people produce mohair, a lightweight, lustrous, and durable natural fiber often used in sweaters, scarves, high-end textiles, and handmade products. Mohair was once a major source of pride for Turkey, but the industry has shrunk significantly compared with its golden age. In 1991, the country had more than 1.18 million Angora goats and produced around 1,379 tons of raw mohair. By 2024, the Angora goat population had fallen to around 202,000 head, with mohair production at about 339 tons. Even so, Turkey remains one of the important countries in the global mohair industry. What makes Angora goats special is their ability to adapt well to dry plateaus, mountainous areas, and nutrient-poor grasslands in central Anatolia. In places where crop farming is difficult because of water shortages or poor soil, goat raising becomes a way to make use of the landscape. Farmers usually graze the goats on pastures, provide extra feed in winter, monitor newborn kids, control parasites, and protect the herd after shearing because the goats are more vulnerable to cold at that stage. The process of making mohair begins with regular shearing. After shearing, the fleece is gathered and sorted by length, fineness, color, and cleanliness. Fiber from young goats is usually softer and finer, so it has higher value. The raw mohair is then pressed into bales and transported to factories. There, the fleece is washed to remove dust, grease, and impurities. Next come carding, combing, spinning into yarn, and then dyeing, weaving, or knitting into sweaters, scarves, fabrics, and fashion products. In this way, the Angora goat reveals a very different side of Turkish agriculture. It does not only produce food, but also creates valuable materials and high-end fashion products. When people think of Turkey, many think of Turkish coffee. But in everyday life, tea is actually the more popular drink. From restaurants, offices, and bus stations to family living rooms, small tulip-shaped glasses of tea appear almost everywhere. The center of Turkey's tea industry lies in Rize and the eastern Black Sea region. This area has conditions that are very different from much of the country's interior. The sea on one side, mountains on the other, high humidity, abundant rainfall, and green hillsides all year round. Thanks to this climate, Rize has become the most important tea-growing region in the country. In 2023, Turkey produced around 343,500 tons of processed tea, almost fully meeting domestic demand. Average tea consumption reached about 4.6 kilograms per person per year, while exports accounted for only a small share, at just over 5,000 tons. Tea plants in Rize are usually grown in dense rows along the hillsides. Farmers have to prune them regularly to keep the bushes low, stimulate young shoots, and make harvesting easier. Because of the steep terrain, many areas still rely on hand-picking or handheld tea-cutting machines with collection bags attached behind them. These machines help quickly cut the buds and young leaves from the surface of the tea canopy. After harvest, the tea leaves are quickly transported to factories for processing. The process usually includes withering, machine rolling to break down the leaf structure, oxidation to create the color and flavor of black tea, then drying and grading. Finally, the tea is packaged as loose-leaf tea, tea bags, or higher-end product lines. In western Turkey, the Aegean region is the center of one of the country's most traditional export products, Sultana raisins. These grapes are mainly grown in Manisa, Izmir, and Denizli, where the summers are hot, sunny, and dry, ideal conditions for natural drying. In the 2023-24 season, Turkey produced around 245,000 tons of Sultana raisins. By the 2024-25 season, although exports reached only about 153,000 tons, revenues still exceeded $546 million thanks to a sharp rise in prices. Even in the vineyard, growers have to control the variety, planting density, pruning, irrigation, and harvest timing. Grapes used for raisins are usually seedless varieties with high sugar content. When the bunches reach the right level of ripeness, workers cut them by hand to avoid bruising the fruit, then transfer them to the processing area. Before drying, in many places the grapes are dipped in a solution of potassium carbonate and olive oil. This coating thins the natural wax layer on the grape skin, allowing moisture to escape faster, shortening the drying time and helping preserve a more attractive golden brown color. Once the grapes are dry, they are taken to factories for cleaning, stem removal, washing, size grading, and additional drying if needed. Modern processing lines also use color sorters, laser scanners, X-ray sorters, and metal detectors to identify damaged fruit, small stones, impurities, or foreign objects. Finally, the raisins are packed in bulk cartons or retail packaging, then exported to Europe, the United Kingdom, the Middle East, and many other markets.